He decapitated his own mother with a butter knife, his teeth, and his bare hands. Then he placed her head 15 feet from her body in the backyard. This wasn't a scene from a horror movie. This was the reality for 51-year-old Shelly Johnson, a high school guidance counselor whose life ended in the most unimaginable way possible. Murdered by her own son, Terrell Johnson, a 29-year-old former Army veteran with a history of mental illness. What began as an argument over credit cards escalated into one of the most brutal matricides in Mississippi's history. A son who was supposed to love and protect his mother instead became her executioner in their Stone County home. In this episode of Dark Trace Crime Stories, we'll walk you through the exact timeline that led to this horrific murder. You'll hear the shocking details of Terrell's confession, how he strangled his mother until she passed out, then took a butter knife to her neck, and when that wasn't enough, used his teeth and bare hands to complete the decapitation. We'll expose the failures of a mental health system that couldn't prevent this tragedy despite Terrell's history of hospitalizations. This is the story of a mother who dedicated her life to helping troubled teenagers, but couldn't save her own son from the darkness consuming him. Before we dive deeper, if you're new to Dark Trace Crime Stories, welcome. We investigate the most shocking true crime cases to understand what went wrong and how similar tragedies might be prevented. Take a second right now to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. If you find this case as disturbing as I do, click like button and share this video to help more people discover this important story. Now let's get back to Shelly Johnson's life before it was so brutally cut short.
Descriptions of how Shelly Johnson died is hard to fathom. Coroner Wayne Fleury told us someone decapitated the Stone County woman. Her body was outside her home next to a privacy fence, and her head was on the other side of that fence, some 15 to 20 feet away. Stone County deputies arrested 29-year-old Terrell Johnson and charged him with first-degree murder. How they linked Johnson to this murder case has not yet been released. According to coroner, detectives have surgical records that now confirm Johnson's mom is the murder victim.
Shelly Johnson was more than just another victim in a true crime story. She was a beacon of hope and guidance at Hattiesburg High School in Mississippi, where students and staff alike respected her dedication to helping young people navigate the turbulent waters of adolescence. At 51, Shelly had built a reputation as the counselor students could turn to when they felt lost or overwhelmed. She was the one who helped them plan their futures, apply for colleges, and work through personal problems. Her office was a safe haven, a place where troubled teens found understanding instead of judgment. She was the kind of educator who went above and beyond. One colleague would later tell reporters. She didn't just help students with their academic schedules. She helped them with their life schedules. The cruel irony of Shelly's life was that while she successfully guided countless students through their darkest moments, she couldn't do the same for her own son. Despite her professional expertise in adolescent psychology and behavior, the challenges presented by her adult son's deteriorating mental health proved insurmountable. Shelly lived with Terrell in their Stone County home. While she spent her days helping others build their futures, she returned home each evening to face the unpredictable behavior of her son, a young man whose mind was increasingly betraying him. Her siblings described Shelly as resilient and patient. They knew she was dealing with difficulties at home, but even they didn't grasp the full extent of the danger. They maintained regular contact with her, checking in frequently, a practice that would ultimately lead to the discovery of her murder when those check-ins suddenly went unanswered. What makes Shelly's story particularly heartbreaking is that she continued to stand by her son despite his struggles. Where many might have given up, she persisted, perhaps believing that her professional skills and maternal love could eventually break through to him. This unwavering support would ultimately cost Shelly her life. Terrell Johnson had once worn the uniform of the United States Army. He had been a soldier, trained, disciplined, and serving his country. But something changed after his military service. The exact timeline of his mental health deterioration remains unclear, but what is known is that by 2018, Terrell had been hospitalized multiple times for psychiatric issues. The relationship between mother and son had grown increasingly strained. Neighbors would later report hearing arguments from the Johnson home, though none suspected the violence that was brewing behind closed doors. Terrell's behavior had become erratic, unpredictable, and concerning enough that he required professional intervention on multiple occasions. Despite these hospitalizations, Terrell continued to live with his mother. Whether this arrangement was due to financial necessity, Shelly's unwillingness to abandon her troubled son, or a lack of alternative housing options for someone with his condition, the decision to maintain this living situation would prove fatal. By early June 2018, the tension between mother and son had reached a breaking point. The catalyst for the final, deadly confrontation was seemingly mundane, an argument over credit cards. While the exact details of this dispute remain unclear, what is known is that Terrell became enraged during this discussion. This wasn't a crime of momentary passion that ended quickly. This was a prolonged, deliberate act that continued well after Shelly had lost consciousness. Terrell would later tell investigators that the attack got out of hand, a chilling understatement that fails to capture the extreme brutality of his actions. In the aftermath of the murder, Terrell made no immediate attempt to flee. Instead, he moved his mother's decapitated body to the backyard, placing her head approximately 15 feet from her body near a privacy fence. His explanation for this action was as disturbing as it was practical. He didn't want the house to smell. For days, Shelly's body remained in the backyard while Terrell continued to live in the home where he had killed her. During this time, her siblings grew increasingly concerned about their inability to reach her. The mental health system had multiple opportunities to intervene before Terrell's violence reached its peak. His history of hospitalizations indicates that professionals were aware of his condition, yet somehow the severity of his potential for violence was either underestimated or inadequately addressed. While specific dates of his previous hospitalizations aren't publicly available, what is clear is that Terrell had been in and out of mental health facilities. Each discharge represented a decision by medical professionals that he was stable enough to return to society. Decisions that, in hindsight, proved catastrophically wrong. The failure wasn't just in the treatment itself, but in the lack of follow-up care and monitoring. Terrell, like many individuals with severe mental illness, was released back into the community without sufficient support structures or oversight to ensure he remained on medication or continued therapy. By June 2018, whatever tenuous stability Terrell had maintained began to collapse entirely. The argument over credit cards that triggered the murder wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the breaking point after what was likely a period of escalating tension and deteriorating mental state. June 6, 2018, the discovery. Shelly's siblings hadn't heard from her in several days, an unusual silence that raised immediate concerns. They requested a welfare check, sending deputies from the Stone County Sheriff's Department to the Johnson home. When deputies arrived, they were met by Terrell, who calmly told them that his mother was away on a cruise. This explanation immediately raised suspicions among the officers. Shelly had never mentioned any travel plans to her siblings, who were close enough to her that such information would typically have been shared. The deputies' instincts told them something was wrong. They pressed further, eventually gaining access to the inside of the home. What they discovered was a scene of horror that would haunt them for years to come, a bedroom soaked in blood, with splatter patterns on the walls and bed that indicated extreme violence had occurred there. Further investigation of the property led to the gruesome discovery in the backyard. Shelly's decapitated body had been placed behind the house, with her head positioned approximately 15 feet away near a privacy fence. The level of decomposition indicated she had been dead for several days. Terrell was immediately taken into custody. During questioning by Captain Ray Boggs of the Stone County Sheriff's Department, Terrell didn't attempt to deny his actions. Instead, he provided a full confession, describing in disturbing detail how he had killed his mother. According to Captain Boggs' later testimony, Terrell admitted that after the argument over credit cards, he physically assaulted his mother, beating her severely. He then strangled her until she lost consciousness. What followed was the most horrific part of the crime. Terrell described taking a butter knife from the kitchen and beginning the process of decapitation. When the knife proved inadequate for the task, He used his bare hands and teeth to complete the separation of his mother's head from her body. Forensic examination would later confirm that Shelly died from multiple blunt force injuries to the head, consistent with the beating Terrell described. The decapitation occurred post-mortem, a detail that, while slightly less horrific than if it had occurred while Shelly was still alive, does little to diminish the shocking brutality of the act. In his confession, Terrell showed an unsettling level of practicality about his actions after the murder. He explained that he moved his mother's body outside to prevent the house from smelling as decomposition set in. This calculated decision suggests that despite whatever mental illness he was suffering from, Terrell maintained enough awareness to attempt to conceal evidence and avoid detection. The timeline of events following the murder indicates that Terrell continued living in the home for several days with his mother's body in the backyard. He made no attempt to flee the area or establish an alibi. Instead, he simply waited, perhaps believing his explanation about a cruise would be sufficient to deflect suspicion when inevitably questioned about his mother's whereabouts. This period between the murder and discovery represents another failure of the system, not in preventing the crime, but in detecting it sooner. Had there been more regular check-ins or monitoring of Terrell, given his mental health history, Shelly's body might have been discovered earlier, and the full extent of his deteriorating mental state might have been recognized before it culminated in violence. The arrest of Terrell Johnson was just the beginning of a legal process that would ultimately determine whether his mental illness excused him from criminal responsibility for his actions.
Johnson, did you do it?
I plead guilty.
You plead guilty?
Yes, I done it.
Why?
Gotta talk to my lawyer.
The coast, a Wiggins man will spend the rest of his life behind bars after murdering his mother. This is footage from the scene back in 2018. According to court documents, the jury convicted 35-year-old Terrell Johnson after hearing gruesome details about the murder. Johnson tried to tell officials his mother was on vacation before deputies located her severed head and body in the backyard. They also heard from his own confession of how he used his teeth and knives to remove the head. Johnson claimed insanity, but that claim was shot down.
Following his arrest and confession, Terrell Johnson's case moved through the legal system. His defense attorney, Jim Davis, considered an insanity plea based on Terrell's documented history of mental health issues, including previous hospitalizations and evidence of delusional thinking. The case proceeded to the Stone County Circuit Court under Judge Steve Simpson. During pretrial hearings, the judge made key rulings about what evidence would be admissible, including excluding some hearsay testimony about conversations Shelly reportedly had regarding her son's psychotic behavior before her death. The prosecution argued that despite his mental health struggles, Terrell was fully aware of his actions at the time of the murder. They suggested he may have been under the influence of drugs, which would counter the insanity defense by indicating he voluntarily impaired his own judgment. When the case finally went to trial, the jury was presented with the brutal facts of the crime, including Terrell's detailed confession and the graphic crime scene evidence. The defense team presented expert psychological testimony about Terrell's mental state, arguing that his severe mental illness prevented him from understanding the nature and wrongfulness of his actions. In what must be one of the shortest deliberations for such a serious case, the Stone County jury took just 18 minutes to reach their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. This remarkably brief deliberation suggests the jury found the evidence of premeditation and Terrell's awareness of his actions overwhelming, despite his documented mental health issues. Following his conviction, Terrell Johnson was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He remains incarcerated today, serving his sentence for the brutal murder of his mother. Shelly Johnson's death represents a tragic failure at multiple levels: a mental health system that couldn't adequately treat or monitor Terrell's condition, a family support system that perhaps didn't fully recognize the danger he posed, and a society that still struggles to balance the rights of the mentally ill with the safety of those around them. From this case, several critical lessons emerge that might help prevent similar tragedies. First, mental health intervention must be more comprehensive and continuous. Terrell's history of hospitalizations indicates that his condition was known to medical professionals, yet the interventions clearly failed to address the severity of his illness or potential for violence. Families dealing with mentally ill loved ones need better resources, support, and guidance on when and how to seek help before violence occurs. Second, the warning signs of potential violence must be taken more seriously. While we don't know all the details of Terrell's behavior leading up to the murder, his previous hospitalizations suggest there were recognized concerns about his stability. Better risk assessment tools and protocols might help identify those at highest risk of violent behavior. Third, community vigilance and welfare checks are crucial safety mechanisms. Shelly's siblings' decision to request a welfare check when they couldn't reach her led to the discovery of the crime. Communities should normalize and encourage such checks when loved ones are out of contact for unusual periods, especially when there are known risk factors present. Finally, the judicial system must continue to evolve in how it handles cases involving severe mental illness. While Terrell was found criminally responsible for his actions, his case highlights the ongoing challenge of determining culpability when mental illness is a factor. Better collaboration between mental health professionals and the legal system might lead to more effective interventions before violence occurs. Shelly Johnson's legacy extends beyond the horrific circumstances of her death. As a guidance counselor, she dedicated her life to helping young people navigate challenges and build better futures. The cruel irony that she couldn't save her own son from his demons doesn't diminish the positive impact she had on countless students during her career. If you're watching someone you love struggle with mental illness, don't wait until crisis strikes. Reach out for help now. And if you're concerned about someone's safety, trust your instincts and request a welfare check. It could save a life. This has been Dark Trace Crime Stories. Remember, understanding these tragedies isn't about sensationalizing violence. It's about learning from them to prevent future victims. If this story impacted you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with others who might benefit from these important lessons. And tell us in the comments, what do you think could have been done differently to prevent this tragedy? What warning signs do you think might have been missed? Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and remember, the darkest crimes often hide in plain sight.